Members, this is the appointed time. We have a quorum. So let me first invite the administration to come in. Members, if you have questions, please press the button now.
Hola. 我哋歡迎政府當局嘅代。
Let me welcome the officials from the administration. We're joined by Ms. Mabel Chan, Secretary for Transport and Logistics, and also the Commissioner for Transport. I will first invite Ms. Mabel Chan, Secretary for Transport and Logistics, to walk us through the bill. And then the floor will be open for members to put questions. So, Secretary, when you're ready. Good morning, Chairman, members. May I take some time to wish everybody a Happy New Year, because this is the first meeting in this council since the start of 2025. This is the Bills Committee on Road Tunnels Government Amendment Bill 2024. I'm going to call this the bill. Now, this is the first meeting of the Bills Committee, and first of all, I'd like to thank members for helping us scrutinize the bill. And let me now take some time to brief members on the policy objective and the specific details of the bill. The TLB Tunnel is a major traffic link between New Territories West and North. It serves residents in Yuen Long and North District. It also connects to the container terminals and the airport, so it is a very important traffic link. In light of the increasing economic activities that will happen in the region in the future, this TLB tunnel will remain an artery in our transport network. We need to ensure smooth flow of people and goods in the area. And we also envisage an increase in traffic flow, so we need to get ready. There are 4 policy objectives. First, traffic management. The government will take over the TLB tunnel, and we are leveraging this opportunity to put in place a toll plan. The purpose is to ensure smooth flow of traffic in TLB tunnel. We'd also like to take this opportunity to divert traffic coming from the New Territories via Tuen Mun Road and the Tolo Highway. At the moment, traffic flow is heavy along these alternative routes. We also need to ensure smooth operation of public transport services for the sake of residents' commuting needs in New Territories West and North. The third objective is that we abide by the efficiency first principle. Now, for commercial vehicles or vehicles serving the logistics industry, they contribute to our economy, and through putting in place our toll plan, we seek to rationalize traffic flow so that more commercial vehicles will use TLB tunnel, which is a very convenient link. We're going to set tolls at a suitable level, but we find the level to be reasonable for commercial vehicles in general. The last objective is this, and it is very important. For a while, we've been discussing tunnel tolls, and there are questions in relation to the government's policy. Now, we need to emphasize that we need to abide strictly to the user pays principle and the cost recovery principle. That means through introducing tunnel tolls, we will be able to raise resources for effective management and operation. Now, there are 2 parts to this bill. The first relates to the takeover of the Tai Lam Tunnel, and the second relates to the introduction of a time-varying toll plan. The Transport Department made reference to the rationalization of tolls for cross-harbor tunnels in 2023. We prepared the corresponding projections, and we also took into account the views of various stakeholders. And meanwhile, we consider the four major policy objectives, as I have mentioned. We are going to make full use of the capacity of Tai Lam Tunnel in the future whilst maintaining smooth traffic. We'll also be able to alleviate the traffic conditions at Tuen Mun Road and Tolo Highway. 5% of traffic will be diverted. That means for the morning peak hours, for traffic coming from Tuen Mun via Tuen Mun Road to urban areas, we envisage that there'll be a reduction of up to 300 vehicles. Whilst abiding by the cost recovery principle, we also make an effort to seek views from members of the panel on transport of the Legislative Council, and as a result, we have come up with a time-varying toll plan for private cars and motorcycles. Well, this is in fact the unanimous view of the panel members. And having consulted the Transport Advisory Committee, we have then been engaging members outside the Council, and we have suitably adjusted the proposed tolls. We've also shortened the peak hour periods as much as possible. Now I'd like to tell you more about the toll plan. For private cars, depending on the different slots, the tolls for private cars will range from $45 to $18. That represents a reduction rate between 22% and 69%. And on weekends, that means off-peak time slots, the tolls for private cars will be $18. Now, in light of the current traffic condition in Tai Lam Tunnel, we have prepared this structure. For private cars on weekends, that is off-peak time slots, there'll be a uniform toll for private cars pitched at $18. For commercial vehicles, they will be charged an all-day uniform toll of $43, and the reduction rate is even greater than that for private cars. And that means a reduction of up to $170. Basically, the reduction relates to the tolls currently in place for double-decker buses. So the reduction rate is between 33 and 80%. We'd like to encourage more commercial vehicles to make use of this direct link, which can help them save time. And this can help drive up efficiency for commercial vehicles. Say for vehicles coming from Yunnan to Tsuen Wan, by using Tai Lam Tunnel, they'll be able to save 10 kilometers of journey time comparing to using Tuen Mun Highway or Tuen Mun Road. They will also be able to save fuel costs, and this can help offset the proposed tolls. So we've strived to strike a balance, having considered the basket of factors. Now, comparing to Tuen Mun Road, Tai Lam Tunnel is a straight course. It's not built on a hilly terrain, unlike the Tuen Mun Road. So for logistics and commercial vehicles, they will find the Tai Lam Tunnel more efficient. For taxis, we propose charging them an all-day uniform toll of $28, and that's a reduction rate of over 50%. This can help the trade in terms of operation, as more passengers would choose this route. We believe that the proposed toll plan can help meet the public expectation for lower tolls. Meanwhile, we can also help support the operation of the trade and enhance transport efficiency. for the trade, for passengers, and the public in general. It's going to be a win-win. In our previous discussions, we've heard views from members, especially suggestions on whether there is room for further lowering the tolls. Now, through our transport model, we prepared scenario planning. That means we prepared different scenarios to project the traffic condition at Tai Lam Tunnel during peak hours, and traffic congestion is envisaged under the transport model. We will continue to monitor the changes in demand as well as the traffic condition in NT North and NT West. We'll also keep in view the relevant infrastructure works such as Route 11 and its impact on the transport network in NT Northwest in general. We're going to keep an open mind, and we will review the Tai Lam Tunnel tolls in a timely manner. So perhaps I'll stop here. I'll give more time for members to ask questions, and my team and myself will be happy to take questions from members. Let me read out the names of members who would like to ask questions. Let's follow this order. Johnny Ng, Lau Chi Pang, Benson Look, Lam Chun Sing, Lau Kwok Fan, Ma Fong Kwok, Chow Meng Kong, Andrew Lam, Yo Pak Lau, Yim Kong, Frankie Yik, Luk Chung Hong, Michael Tin, Chen Han Pan. I'll give each member 4 minutes questions and answers. Mr. Johnny Ng. Thank you, Chairman. This is the first meeting, so may I wish everybody a Happy New Year. I'd like to first ask the Secretary a few questions. In fact, I'd like to make a comment first. I think that the time-varying toll will have the support of the public in general, as the toll levels will be lowered comparing to the current levels. Now, according to some members of the public, they believe the toll levels are still on the high side, since the Tai Lam Tunnel will vest in the government. In terms of the economy of scale, tolls for Tai Lam Tunnel should be further lowered. So on the point of economy of scale, we'd like to have a response from you so as to allay the public's concern. The next question is about the peak time slots and whether the capacity will be reached. As we know, in the coming decade, there'll be a lot of activities with the setting up of industries in the northern metropolis. So according to your model, will the proposed tolls cause major traffic congestion in the NT Northwest? My next question relates to government policy. With the Tai Lam Tunnel being vested in the government in the near future, will a holistic review be conducted? Can't we make all tunnels toll-free, or at least put in place an electronic road pricing plan so as to ensure smoother flow of traffic whilst allowing the government to recover cost, since the government's books are running red? So I'd like to know whether you can give us a hint at the macro level. Thank you for the 3 questions. The first question is on economy of scale and the cost of managing the tunnel as well as the revenue. My point is this. The government will engage a contractor for management, operation, and maintenance of the tunnel. This comes under a specific account in the public coffers. What's more important is that we engage contractors for specific government tunnels respectively, and we also adopt the cost recovery principle. Whilst keeping an eye on the public coffers in general, we need to consider how the books are balanced and how costs are recovered for specific government tunnels. Now, to take your question, I think in general, we need to consider the fact that we've put in significant resources in the construction and operation of government tunnels. In the past, we tended to consider individual government tunnels, but time is right for us to take the macro view. And that is to say, we need to give play to the role to manage traffic as well as abiding by the user pays principle to recover cost. To take your other question, in relation to all government tunnels and major roads, whether the government would consider introducing electronic road pricing. And let me say this. In the future, we're going to review the tolls for different tunnels or pairs of tunnels. Instead of considering the toll levels for specific tunnels or roads, we are going to take a macro view to consider the pairing of tunnels. And on heavily congested routes, this is something close to the heart of the government. As you can see, in terms of the proposal submitted to the TAC for consultation and the proposal contained in this bill, we maintain the same level for peak time slots. Still, for off-peak time slots, we consider whether there is room to further lower the tolls, since the tunnels are here to serve the public. So we keep in mind our objectives, which is to ensure smooth traffic, whilst suitably lower the tolls, and we believe we have suitably met the public expectation.
Professor Lau Chi-Pang. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Johnny Ng's questions on cost recovery. Should we actually adopt this principle of cost recovery and users pays? Because we have to look at the usage of the tunnel. I live in Tuen Mun. I think that we should link the tolls with the usage of the roads and tunnels. If the capacity of the tunnel is 100% and you lower the toll by $2, then the roads will be congested. You can perhaps conduct a scenario study on the proposed scenarios or situation. I think that instead of adopting the user pays principle, we should look at how the toll level affects the usage or capacity of the roads and tunnels. So I suggest that you abandon this principle of user pays and cost recovery, because that could be misleading. Tai Lam Tunnel as an important part of the New Territories transport system. It brings traffic from the northwest New Territories to the south. I think that you should adopt an appropriate tunnel toll level. Second, I think that we should perhaps introduce more elements into the plan. For example, by giving discounts to vehicles or private cars carrying 4 passengers. Can you offer, for example, a $5 discount for private cars carrying more passengers at peak time slots, for example? By this, we can give more options to the people and to incentivize drivers using the tunnel. I think that this $5 discount would be motivating and attractive. Third, it is said that the Tai Lam Tunnel will help divert traffic from the Tuen Mun Road. Of course, that would be effective. to a certain extent. I think that we should look at Tate's current tunnel and Two Moon Road together and incorporate them into the scenario study that you conduct. Thank you. Secretary. Thank you, Professor Lau, for the question. I know that you commute in Two Moon very often. You are perhaps more familiar with that than us. Regarding your second and third suggestions, I will give a response. I completely agree. For the 4 policy objectives that I mentioned, that include the user's pay and cost recovery principles, but we adopt these principles from the perspective of traffic regulation and management. We have to look at the functions of Tai Lam Tunnel and the usage as well as the future growth of traffic. I think that the people are reasonable. Well, they ask the government to lower the toll further, but I think that we have to make sure that the tunnel can play its function effectively. If you look at the population growth and the growth of traffic, from 2014 to 2023, the two-way traffic grew from 290,000 trips to 360,000 trips in 2023 from 2014. With the growth of population in Yunnan and North New Territories, well, it grew from 940,000 to 1 million in 2023 by 7%. In 2026, it is projected that there will be a further 3% growth in the population. That we have taken account of. So we foresee that in 2026, during peak time slots, there is still residue carrying capacity in the Tai Lam Tunnel of 15%. So please be rest assured. Second point on the diversion of traffic from Two Moon Road. I understand your point, because Two Moon Tunnel is free of charge and it's a very direct route. A lot of Two Moon buses and residents use Two Moon Road. We see that there is still spare capacity in Tai Lam Tunnel. So we try to divert 300 vehicles from Two Moon Road to Tai Lam Tunnel. And I think that this will actually smoothen the traffic in Two Moon Road during peak time slots. And that will shorten the traffic queue. And we will definitely review the effect of the toll on Two Moon Road and Tai Lam Tunnel. It takes time for the traffic to stabilize upon implementation of the new tolls. So in perhaps 9 months, we will have a more concrete analysis. On carpooling, well, the Transport Department is conducting a study on carpooling. We note your suggestions and we will look into it. Thank you. Next, Mr. Benson Look. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Secretary. After the government takes over the Tai Lam Tunnel, I agree that we should impose the tolls and because we have to abide by the user's pays principle and efficiency first principle. Prices of various consumer products have been on the rise, including sausage McMuffin of the McDonald's and a lot of different products. People always want discounts and lower tolls, but if the tunnels sustain a deficit, that's not what we want to see. I have 2 points of concern. First of all, the administration said that in order to smoothen the traffic at Tolo Highway and Two Moon Road, the VC ratio is proposed to be at 0.99 at Two Moon Tunnel or Thailam Tunnel. If the figure goes to 1, then there will be traffic congestions. From 2023 to 2026, there will be a 7% increase in traffic flow. And that will result in the higher usage of the Thailam Tunnel. And there could easily be traffic congestion. So I wonder why you set the target of VC ratio at 0.99. And I see that the Commissioner for Transport can increase or decrease the toll by $3. So I wonder under what mechanism or conditions would the Commissioner invoke the mechanism? And it is said that in 2033, the Route 11 going from Yuen Long to North Lantau will be commissioned. Will you lower the toll level by then? And will you put in place a price adjustment mechanism? Second, I'd like to talk about how the toll level affect general members of the public. A lot of people take public transport to go to work, including myself, and I see that the toll for bus has decreased by 80%. But for bus passengers, they don't get a lower fare, although it's more likely for the tunnel to be congested in the future. How do you make sure that people feel the benefits of the government taking over the tunnel? Secretary, thank you. First, on the VC estimates, I do have my colleagues who are experts here. The 0.99 figure is not our target. Andrew is very familiar with this. Whenever we see a VC ratio of 0.99 and we stop developing the roads, that would not be feasible. When VC ratio reaches 1.1 or 1.2, that would be the breaking point. We also have to look at how many links there are and how many slip roads there are connecting to the major road. You are right. We have to be careful with the 0.99 VC ratio. We have to be alert and mindful of it. However, the experts think that this is feasible because we have also looked at the slip roads linking to the major roads to see how the traffic can be carried. On the review mechanism, well, I do agree that we should have one. Motorists and residents are very smart. They are highly mobile. So we should be flexible with our infrastructure system as well. Whenever opportunities present themselves, we have to take action. We now empower the Commissioner for Transport to adjust the toll levels for Thailam Tunnel, just like what the Commissioner can do for the rest of the road harbor crossings. Traffic conditions changes all the time. Although the Legislative Council is very effective these days, legislative amendments take time. That's why at that time we decided to empower the Commissioner of Transport to adjust the toll level. But the power is not limitless. Only under the specific scenario set out in the legislation, can the commissioner adjust the toll level? And the toll level change is limited to $3. We think that we have struck a balance, and we will make sure that the transport department monitor the change of traffic flow. We will not avoid change.
As for buses and public transport commuters, I'd like to share with you two observations. Recently, we received application from franchise bus companies to raise fares. The proposal has been approved by the CN Council. Now, the fare increase is also subject to approval by the Legislative Council. Now, and in the proposed fare increase for franchise buses, we've taken into account the VC ratio. And we also have put in place the franchise bus toll exemption fund. And that is to say, for tolls exempted, they are deposited into a fund. And that when we examine their proposed fare increase, we also consider the fund position, and the fare increase will be netted off against the balance in the fund so as to maintain stability of the fare structure. Now, I also note members' views. After taking over the Thailand Tunnel, we will also put in place the Hong Kong e-toll as well. And by then, we'll have a good opportunity to better rationalize the tolls for different tunnels. So for residents in NT West, they may not directly feel the benefits of the bus fare adjustment, but then they will find the arrangement more convenient, and we'll also be discussing with the companies so that more BBIs can be put in place and more concessions can be offered. Mr. Lam Chen Sing. After the government takes over the Thailand Tunnel, the toll levels for different vehicle types will be lowered, and in theory, all vehicles will benefit from the takeover. However, there are still problems. For example, for light goods vans or commercial vehicles in general, for the 3 harbor crossings, the tolls were also lowered. That is, for goods vehicles, the tolls are reduced from $85 to $50 for Western Harbor Crossing, and for taxis, $70 to $25. But for Thailand Tunnel, the reduction rate is much smaller. That's for taxis from $58 to $28, and for commercial vehicles from $64 to $43. So in light of the operation of the trade, I hope the government will further slash the tolls for them. For LGVs, the tolls for using the Cross Harbor Tunnel actually increases from $15 to $50. So if they adopt the pattern of Cross Harbor Tunnel and Thailand Tunnel as the usual pairing, then the toll reduction and toll increase will offset each other. Now, have you considered the operating pattern of the trade, since these LGVs are mostly standalone drivers? They work, they're self-employed. So will you consider lowering the tolls for light goods vehicles to $35? Have you prepared the projections specifically to light goods vehicles? The other point is this. we often chant these phrases: users pay principle for cost recovery. Now, are we just chanting slogans after all? Because for government tunnels, of course, you would cite these principles. What about toll-free tunnels? In 2023, the operating cost for Thailand Tunnel was $440 million. So after the government takes back Thailand Tunnel, will you still base your estimates on the cost I mentioned, or is it possible that costs will be further driven down? Then on the basis of cost recovery, is it possible to further lower the tolls for commercial vehicles? I thank Mr. Lam for the questions. On LGVs, I will let the Commissioner for Transport supplement my answer in a moment. Now, as we prepare the transport model, we've considered the data in relation to different vehicle types, and they correlate with each other. Now, our objectives are to regulate traffic for efficient traffic management. We've exhausted the room for reducing tolls. We go by the efficiency first principle. We also want to attract more commercial vehicles to use Thailand Tunnel. We charge the commercial vehicles for using our tunnel, of course, but they're able to save fuel costs at the same time, and as well as save time, so we find the arrangement reasonable. As for recovering cost, indeed, like Mr. Lam said, in 2022-23, the operating cost of Thailand Tunnel was $440 million. That's according to the current mode of management and operation. In the future, the mode of management and operation will very much depend on the tendering exercise for MOM contractor to be rolled out by the Transport Department. But we'll emphasize these two principles, the user pays principle as well as cost recovery. But on top of that, we also have another major objective, and that is to regulate traffic. We can't compromise the function of Thailand Tunnel and smooth traffic regulation for the sake of lowering tolls, because this will induce serious traffic congestion, and this will also have far-reaching implications. So the proposal floated have already addressed the points raised by Mr. Lam. Now let me give the floor to the Transport Department to supplement the answer on LGVs. For commercial vehicles, you see that there is a reduction of tolls across the board, and that the reduction rate ranges from 33% to 80%. Thailand Tunnel at the moment charges different tolls for different types of commercial vehicles, and that is for light goods vehicles. As a result, there is a minor reduction of just 33%, from $64 to $43. We also consider the overall contribution of commercial vehicles to our economy, and we give priority to their needs. At the same time, abiding by the efficiency first principle, because of the goods they carry and the volume of the vehicles, we offer a greater reduction for some types of commercial vehicles. On the whole, our strategy for the Thailand Tunnel tolls is that we do offer a greater reduction for commercial vehicles, considering that it provides a major logistic artery for vehicles plying north and south. Mr. Edward Lau. At the moment, Thailand tunnel tolls are really expensive, so there is great expectation for tolls to be lowered after the government takes back the tunnel. Still, for peak time slots, it's $45, and it's even more expensive than the tolls for some of the harbor crossings. I'm not sure about the government's transport model and their data analysis. What I want to say is, I don't want to see lower tolls followed by heavy jams. So the taste of the pudding is in the eating. That means, for the time being, I would accept this proposal. I urge members to be pragmatic. As in our earlier discussion, $18 will be charged during off-peak time slots. You've taken into account the cost of maintenance and repair. So for the tolls charged on top of $18, they would form the toll revenues under the user's pay principle. And according to the Secretary, they would take about 6 months to gauge the traffic flow after the government's takeover. What happens if there is a reduction of traffic flow? Will you lower the tolls immediately? My next question relates to peak hours. The tolls for peak hour time slots will affect traffic flow. Now for Thailand Tunnel, the peak hour period starts at 7:15, and that's really early. The peak time slot period is too long. If it starts so early, it actually disencourages me to set off early. Instead, I'll just set off at the prime peak hour. So is there room to further shorten the peak time slot period so as to achieve diversion of traffic, and that some drivers will be encouraged to set off earlier? Because otherwise, people will just disregard your arrangement and set off at the time they like. So 2 questions. The first question is 6 months on after introducing the new toll structure, if there is less traffic using Thailand Tunnel, would you slash tolls to a more reasonable level to benefit the public? Thank you for the 2 questions. I very much agree with you that the taste of the pudding is in the eating, and that's the common point or the common ground we share. But I'd like to take it further. In terms of traffic tolls on new traffic infrastructure, it takes time to observe the changes. Even a 6-month observation period is too short. During these 6 months, we can compare the traffic data with our traffic model. And that's part of our work. You talked about whether it's possible to further lower tolls immediately. And like Professor James Pang said, whether the new tolls will induce traffic jam. And that takes more than 6 months. We need to have a longer horizon. With increase in population in 2025 and 2026, we also envisage a change in the traveling pattern of logistics vehicles. Now, 35% of traffic using Thailand Tunnel are commercial vehicles, and the percentage is higher than that for the cross or harbor crossings. So we need to keep in mind our objective is to ensure smooth traffic. I think the common ground we have at the moment is that we need to put this to practice and then review the situation. You talked about the peak period, especially for the morning peak period, whether it can be shortened. If my memory serves me right, we did talk about different scenarios at the transport panel. Members also supported adopting a time-varying toll structure. And then our discussion also touched on the length of the morning peak period. In fact, we've incorporated members' views. We've come up with this arrangement in the bill, and that is to say we've shortened the period as much as possible. And it's not just about the peak period. We need to have regard to the off-peak period before that, as well as the normal time slot that follows the peak period. Now, for Thailand Tunnel, there are different tolls before and after the peak periods, and these tolls are relatively lower than the tolls for the peak period. So we need to consider the structure as a whole. We don't want the traffic jam to spread to off-peak hours. Of course, for peak hours, we'll charge a higher tolls. We encourage commuters to set off earlier. But the overall objective is to divert traffic, especially during peak hours. At the same time, we want to avoid traffic congestion during non-peak hours. Again, this is something that we'll keep in view very closely during our review. Let me respond to that. Secretary, you mentioned vehicles serving the logistics industry. This is something that I really cannot disagree. With a new traffic arrangement in the new territories, there will not be many lorries plying Thailand Tunnel, and this is where our views differ. Chairman, if I may, I'll continue to exchange views with Mr. Lau. In fact, for the new arrangements of vehicles coming in and out in the eastern and western part of the new territories, we must bear in mind that in Hong Shui Kiu, Yuen Long, there are still sites for the logistics industry. So apart from the BCPs, we also need to consider goods vehicles that may need to use Thailand Tunnel plying between the logistics sites to, say, the container terminals. So it's just a question of how we manage the different periods.
Mr. Ma Fong Kok. Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure that the people would support the lowering of tunnel tolls upon the government takes over of the Thailand Tunnel. The government uses two reasons to justify imposing tunnel tolls, including the cost recovery and user pays principles. I don't think that these two principles are very reasonable because some government tunnels are free of charge. Two Moon Road needs maintenance and repair as well, but no tolls is charged for users using that road. I think that the government has the responsibility to offer roads and tunnels for the people to use. The main reason for imposing toll is to avoid traffic congestion. If we have more capacity than demand, then there won't be any traffic congestion. And I think that the only justification for imposing toll is to regulate traffic. The government also said that they would impose tolls to drive the economy. I won't go into that now. According to your paper, you said that you will recover $720 million, and in 2 to 3 years ago, it was $450 million. So it seems that you're recovering more recovering more fares than the cost that you incur. There is maintenance cost for all kinds of roads and tunnels. In the mainland, they adopt the electronic road pricing system. Prior to the recovery of cost, the government takes over the road and offer the road for people to use free of charge. And this is the practice in some of the more well-off cities in the mainland. Transport is a kind of service, so I think that the government should look into adopting such a practice. Otherwise, you would find it more difficult to justify imposing tolls in the future if you just adopt the user pays and cost recovery principle. However, I support the proposed toll structure. But I think that the major justification for tolls is to avoid traffic congestion. This is the only reason that I find it justifiable. Thank you. Secretary, thank you, Mr. Ma, for the comment. The government invested heavily into this tunnel and our other transport infrastructure. People have to pay to use these resources. With different tunnels and roads in the city, how do we use a unified justification for the waiver or imposition of tolls? We'll look into that. We'll try to make our justifications more convincing. I find your comment very useful. The tunnel company spent some $400 million on maintaining the tunnel, and now we try to recover $720 million per year in terms of toll revenue. It seems that we are not just abiding by the user pays or cost recovery principle, because we generate a lot of revenue from the tunnel. When we consider the toll level, the functions of the infrastructure and the traffic regulation are a major considerations. If we just look at the user pays and cost recovery principle to establish our toll levels, then we will not be able to regulate traffic or avoid traffic congestions. It's difficult for us to convince people that our proposed transport model can avoid or reduce traffic congestions. With our time-varying tolls imposed in the 3 road harbor crossings, people can feel how effective it is. In the future, when we review government roads and tunnels, we will adopt the same principle. Thank you. Mr. Chao Man-kwong. Thank you. Happy New Year. The people have been looking forward to the government taking over the Talam Tunnel. a lot of lorries and franchised buses are often congested at the Two Moon Road, and that actually troubles the New Territories residents a lot. I hope that 4 objectives can be met by taking over the Talam Tunnel, smoothen the traffic, avoid traffic accidents, improve the economic benefits driven. Fourth, some members talked about connection to boundary control points. That has to do with the logistics suppliers in eastern Guangdong that actually affect whether they would choose the cruise terminals in Hong Kong. So we have to look at all of them in a holistic manner. My first question, people are concerned about the tolls for taxis and commercial vehicles. The proposed tolls is much lower than the existing ones. I wonder if there is any room for further reduction of the tolls so that commercial vehicles will choose Tai Lam Tunnel instead of Two Moon Road. There is fuel cost, time cost. Well, I've been driving for over 10 years. It would be best for the drivers to be able to go from a boundary control point to their destination without any traffic jam. Say, if I start from Yuen Long, if I use Tai Lam Tunnel, then I can reach my destination in 13 minutes by driving 12 kilometers. If I use Two Moon Road, then I have to drive 25 kilometers, spending 25 minutes. I think that we should promote this. We should promote the total cost that can be saved, including the tunnel cost, fuel cost, and time cost. I think that the government should promote it so that we can enhance the efficiency of the tunnel. Second, I know that there is time varying toll applied at the 3 road harbor crossings. The Commissioner for Transport can adjust the toll level by no more than $3. Is this a piece of legislation or administrative measure? Also, on the peak time slots, the administration said that they come up with the period by referencing the current traffic conditions at Tai Lam Tunnel. I'm sure that there will be more traffic at Tai Lam Tunnel after the toll's been reduced. Shouldn't you take into account also the traffic conditions at Two Moon Road? I think that we have to be scientific in our decision making. Thank you. Secretary, first, on reducing traffic accidents, smoothing out traffic on the logistics sites, and your point on quieting container terminals, I fully support them. I think that my colleagues would like to address your questions directly. Perhaps the Commissioner will take the question. Commissioner, for the peak time slots, I will ask the Assistant Commissioner to answer that. While on the time varying tolls on the 3 harbor crossings, we have incorporated the same mechanism. In the legislation, we allow the Commissioner for Transport to adjust the period of the time slots, the length of it, and the toll level. The Commissioner can only adjust the toll level or the time slots once every 6 months. The Commissioner won't have to come to the Legislative Council when he or she adjusts the relevant time slots and the toll level. And I will ask the Assistant Commissioner to elaborate. Thank you. We don't just look at the Thailand Tunnel traffic conditions. When we decide on the length of the peak time slots, we look at the entire new territories, and that's how we decided on the length of the peak time slots. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam.
I like to make 2 comments. First, picking up on what Mr. Ma Fong Kwok said about users pay principle, and to echo what the Secretary said, we should consider economic development, overall traffic management, instead of just focusing on recovering costs and making users pay. Now, back then, we considered the Chiang Mai Bridge, and that for the sake of Lantau development, we should waive the tolls. I fully appreciate that this is a difficult task, that is to abide by the overall principles. The first step is to acknowledge these principles. Otherwise, it would be difficult to resolve other issues like efficiency. Now, for efficiency, especially for VC ratios of 0.9 to 1 to 2, in the coming decade, I am not really optimistic about adopting these ratios for the western and northern part of the new territories, especially because I don't see major demographic changes in the coming decade. And despite that, we are envisaging more economic activities up north. For the north-south links, these major roads will experience a lot of pressure in the coming decade. And that is why we need to introduce different tools, such as electronic traffic management. This is one effective way of adjusting traffic flow in the territory. For the redistribution of cross-harbor traffic, because of the e-tolling arrangement, we've seen results. Now, some say that there are still pain points. In the last legislative amendment exercise, we discussed the time-varying tolls. We identified certain features, and I see these features being incorporated in this bill, and I welcome the government's approach. My question is actually on when adjustments should be made. Should an adjustment be made half-yearly or yearly? Because, as I said, I don't see major improvements in the coming decade as far as our traffic network is concerned, and that the 3 major links, north-south links, will have serious traffic jams. So I'd like to have the administration's observations. Secretary. Mr. Lam mentioned the principles and the focus on traffic management, and I note his views. I'll go back and reflect on how we explain our arrangement. I think it is important to have regard to the social sentiment, and that we're now given opportunities to explain our policies better and not just responding to calls for lower tolls. Now, I very much agree with Andrew that in the near future, because of the demographic structure, there will still be heavy traffic flow north-southwise because of the economic activities taking place down south. Our traffic model has taken into account the forecast in vehicle growth in the coming few years, be it private cars or commercial vehicles, as well as population increase. So our model entails all these elements, is not short-sighted. The third point is when is the right time for a review. Now, we've told the Legislative Council before that the current proposal is not perfect and that a review should be conducted in 6 months, 9 months. And that's always our discussion. But I don't think it's meaningful to put a time frame here. At least we should wait until the traffic condition stabilizes, and then we will be able to identify a trend. And to echo what Andrew said, in order to drive a major change, we need to put in place, say, infrastructure. If we have Route 11, for example, there will be another link available, and that there will be room to further adjust the traffic pattern. The alternative is to put in place electronic road pricing, like what we have under Hong Kong e-toll and the time-varying toll plans. So these are the two major principles we need to abide by in our review. So to answer your question, in 6 months' time, we'll be able to gauge the situation and perhaps identify a trend. And around 1 year down the road, there will be preliminary data available, and by then we can share our observations with the Council and the public. Now, this is already in our agenda without the Legislative Council's reminder. And meanwhile, we need to be very careful about promising to lower tolls. We don't want to induce an expectation for tolls to be lowered definitely. Like you said, in order to drive a major change, we need to wait until, say, the completion of Route 11 or the introduction of electronic road pricing, like Professor Lau mentioned, or Mr. Lau mentioned. We can also tweak the toll structure, making minor adjustments, in other words. We note members' comments. We'll go back and study these ideas. However, at the moment, we need to be very careful. The public relies heavily on on our transport network, and any minor change could spark a major traffic jam, which is a major issue. So I hope I've answered Mr. Lam's question on the time frame. We still have many members waiting to speak, so let's observe the time limit better, and please be succinct, Mr. Perry Yu. Chairman, Tai Lam Tunnel is a convenient link for residents in NT Northwest. It's also a major logistics artery for the industries. Now I'd like to make a comment on cross-boundary people flow. And I think this overall direction is widely acknowledged. We should lower tolls as much as possible without compromising the smoothness of traffic, and that the Commissioner will have the discretion to make minor adjustments in light of the traffic condition. Now, from the point of view of our economy, I'd like to say this. During midnight, from midnight to 7 in the morning, that's the off-peak time slot. The only BCP working around the clock is Huanggang. More flights will be making use of the third runway system. So heavier flow is envisaged. Tai Lam Tunnel will become a very important link for people going to Huanggang BCP after midnight. At the moment, there is no public transport serving between Huanggang BCP and the airport because of the redevelopment of Huanggang BCP underway. By the end of this year, Huanggang BCP will be recommissioned. My question is, how will the Secretary resume transport services between the airport and Huanggang BCP so as to facilitate commuters. Now, that's my first concern. The second concern is tolls. For commercial vehicles and taxis, a uniform all-day toll will be charged. For commercial vehicles, is at $43, and for taxis, $28. Is there any incentive to further encourage cross-boundary coaches to use the tunnel during off-peak time slots so that we can build a link traversing the east and the west? Because for the sake of economic development, we need to ensure that the transport services are available at night. So is there any way to encourage the use of a tunnel for midnight traffic? Well, I'll try to be succinct. Ensuring smooth flow of traffic and lowering the tolls, as well as whether it's possible to further lower the tolls. I think by common sense, if you lower the tolls, naturally, traffic flow will be heavier. And that's also the case for Western Harbour Crossing. So, to take the member's point, we need to consider commercial vehicles, and that includes cross-boundary passengers riding on cross-boundary coaches. And adopting this logic, I'm afraid we cannot lower tolls to a further level for midnight passengers. But the major principle is that we have an all-day uniform toll for commercial vehicles. In the past, for BOT tunnels not operated by the government, say like Western Harbour Crossing, they have dedicated tolls for different types of vehicles. We've heard complaints from the public that the toll structure is so complicated, it poses a management problem. The tolls depend on the gross weight and the number of axles of the commercial vehicles. Now, if we take a look at the uniform toll of $43 for commercial vehicles, for some vehicle types, that represents a major slash. And again, I emphasize that the Thailand Tunnel is a convenient link that helps drivers save fuel and time costs. At this stage, we are confident that our proposed tolls will be attractive for not only commercial vehicle drivers, but also, say, cross-boundary passengers. Now, you ask whether it's possible to further lower the tolls, or that the toll levels are reasonable at the moment. I think we need to wait until we put this to practice. Mr. Yim Kong. Happy New Year, everyone. Well, at the start of a new year, we're here to discuss the toll plan, and I think this is a livelihood issue, and we're being forward-looking. I really appreciate that. I have some comments. Now, about the toll plan after the takeover of Thailand Tunnel by the government should strike a balance between recovering costs to address the deficit and providing convenience for members of the public. Now, on the first point, the government should strive to help the trade lower operating costs. I understand that the tolls will be reduced, but the government should conduct a study to see whether the public are happy with the lower tolls. Now, next point, I understand that by adopting the user pays principle, the annual operating costs now stands at $440 million, and members have asked whether it's possible to lower the operating costs so that there is room to further slash the tolls. I echo what Mr. Ma said. I hope that in the future, say a few years down the road, all government tunnels in Hong Kong can become toll-free. This is already the practice in many cities in the mainland. So on behalf of the public, I'd like to say this to the government. Please keep up the good work. Third point. The redistribution of cross-harbor traffic has proven very successful. The government is now proceeding to adjusting tolls for Tai Lam Tunnel. Now for taxis, a uniform toll of $28 will be charged. How about $15 instead? This number is really easy to remember. For the cross-harbor tunnels, the uniform toll stands at $25. We should not have differential tolls. You should make it as palatable as possible. And with lower tolls, more public buses will be using Tai Lam Tunnel as well. The government should conduct a further study so as to adjust the tolls for public buses and encourage more people to take buses instead of driving. Now, on weekends and public holidays, during off-peak time slots, private cars are uniformly charged $18. What is different between Tai Lam Tunnel and West Harbour Crossing is this. On Sundays and weekends, you don't have people driving to work. On the contrary, for Tai Lam Tunnel, more people tend to use the tunnel to go to the BCPs. So there'll be an exponential growth in traffic flow. It's possible that during weekends, because of lower tolls, there'll be a traffic jam.
Secretary, thank you, Mr. Yim, for your suggestions. I hear that Mr. Yim in general support our proposal, but he wants us to work on the efficiency of the tunnel. He wants us to conduct further study in the future. He spoke for the people by asking us to further lower the toll level, but we have to strike a balance, as I mentioned earlier. He talked about the uniform toll for taxis of $28. We think that the rate of reduction is 52%, and that's substantial enough. We cannot just align the tolls for taxis in Tai Lam Tunnel with that of the three road harbor crossings, because for passengers taking taxis to cross the tunnel, they have to pay the tunnel tolls 2 times for the taxis to go back and forth. Also, we'll work with the bus companies to see if there is more bus interchange discounts so that more bus passengers can benefit. In the Northwest New Territories, there are bus interchange discounts that facilitate a commute among residents in the area. On the toll level for private cars during Sundays and public holidays, Mr. Yim said that there are more people who travel to the mainland during holidays and weekends using boundary control points. We will take note of that. They may use Heung-Yun-Wai apart, and some of them actually take the train to go to the mainland. There is still spare capacity in the tunnel to allow for a proposed fixed toll level. We think that the traffic will still be smooth given a proposal. Mr. Frankie Yik. Just now, Mr. Ma Fong Kwok talked about a very great point. I think that the toll level is a means to regulate traffic, to make sure that there is at least one tunnel or road in the city that is smooth. Mr. Chao Man Kwan also made a very good point. He talked about the total cost consideration. The Secretary also talked about it. I think that the government should promote it. Despite having to pay the tolls, if the journey time is shortened, the drivers can save cost on time and fuels. Different motorists have different considerations. Some of them want to reach their destination in the fastest way possible. Some want to pay the lowest tolls. Some don't want to use the Two Moon Road because it's courteous and because a lot of heavy goods vehicles are using it. Different motorists have different demand, and it's difficult for us to satisfy everyone. We have to rely on data. The government said that under their model, the VC ratio has reached 0.99 during peak time slots. If the VC ratio is 0.88 upon implementation of the new toll level, then there could be room for us to further lower the toll to divert traffic from Two Moon Road and Tolo Highway. I think that we can lower the toll for off-peak time slots and normal time slots, but the Secretary said that they will review the data in 1 year time. If you will lower the toll further, I will support it because the transport and logistics trade are facing much difficulties given our economic conditions. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Yik, for the suggestion. Mr. Yik is familiar with trade. He talked about regulation of traffic and the total cost. We will promote all of them. We need to make sure that the commercial vehicle trade find a proposal reasonable. I thank Mr. Yik for his comments. Let me share with you a piece of information. From Yunlong to Chunwan, if motorists choose Tai Lam Tunnel, they can save time because it's a more direct route. They can drive at a faster speed. If you look at the fuel cost, as the length of the journey is shorter by 13 kilometers, for medium and heavy goods vehicle, they can save over $59 of fuel cost, and that can already offset the toll that they have to pay for using Tai Lam Tunnel, that is $43. Thank you. Mr. Lok Chung Hong. Thank you, Chairman. I support the proposal. I don't want to see traffic congestion after lowering the toll. And that may further congest the Pokoi roundabout or interchange. The government talked about the user pays principle. As mentioned by Mr. Lau Kwok Fan, even by imposing an $8 toll, the government can recover cost. According to electrical information, it is said that the annual revenue for toll would be $720 million per year, and the cost is about $107 million per year. The other maintenance cost is about $100 million. So the government is making profit by operating this tunnel. The government said that they would use the toll revenue to pay for other transport infrastructure. That is unfair to New Territories residents. The Western New Territories residents are not particularly well off. How come they have to pay for transport infrastructures elsewhere in the territories? The commercial vehicle trade want the toll to be the same as that of Tay Karn's Tunnel because the length of Tay Karn's Tunnel is the same as that of Ta Lam Tunnel. On the length of the peak time slots, the peak hours of Ta Lam Tunnel is 2 hours in the morning, and for the PM peak time slots, is 2,000 vehicles. So I don't understand why there is a peak time slots in the evening. And how come there is a normal time slot in the middle? Why not just treat the time slots that are not peak time slots as off-peak time slots so that there won't be 3 time slots charging 3 different tolls in the same day? I think that we should lower the transport cost for the logistics trade. If we lower the toll, then the trade can make use of Ta Lam Tunnel, and they can make use of a more direct route to save on fuel costs. The Secretary did not give us a very clear time frame for review. I find it not very reasonable, Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Lok, for the suggestion. We need to recover costs and make sure that the traffic is smooth. These are very important. I talked about the user pays principle, the cost recovery principles. We shouldn't just look at the revenue and cost before deciding the toll level. We also have to look at the transport model to make sure that the functions of the tunnel can be played and to make sure that the tunnel is smooth and there won't be any traffic jam. Under the new toll structure, the VC ratio at peak time slots is 0.99. With 0.99, there won't be any congestion in the tunnel, but it's close to 1. We don't just look at the existing data. Under the traffic and transport model, as I mentioned, we have to look at the forecast and projections, and we have to be forward-looking. The tunnel does not only serve the existing traffic flow. We see that there will be population growth in the area. There will be demand from the logistics and transport trade, and there will be people moving to the Western New Territories. So when we decide on the toll level, we did not just look at the existing traffic flow in the tunnel, because that would be too short-sighted. We have looked at the potential of the tunnel and the potential traffic, the potential growth in traffic in the future. Second, on the normal and off-peak time slots, apart from peak time slots, as I mentioned earlier, we try to lower the toll level as far as possible for the off-peak and normal time slots. As some members said, for other road harbor crossings, the peak time slots is set at the peak commute time for people who go to work and school. But for the peak time, for Thailand Tunnel is close to the container terminals and airport. The peak time slots is different from the commuting time of the people when they go to work or school. We have to make sure that during time slots that are non-peak time slots, there won't be any traffic congestion.
Thank you, Chairman. Roundtable's position in relation to the toll plan for Thailand Tunnel is very easy. For all infrastructure owned by the government, be it roads or tunnels, they should come toll-free. The government should not base its toll structure on cost recovery or the cost of maintenance and repair. After charging our taxpayers, the government should provide the necessary structure. The government puts in place time-varying tolls to ease traffic congestion, and that's reasonable. Say for Chuen Kwan O Lam Tin Tunnel, the government has invested $1.5 billion, and it's a toll-free tunnel. And for the other tunnel, it's $67 billion investment, again toll-free. Redevelopment of Tuen Mun Road, again with an investment of $8.6 billion, it's toll-free for everybody. There is no investment return to speak of. The government paid nothing for the construction of Thailand Tunnel. And what's outrageous is that the government is charging tolls even during off-peak hours. The government should adopt a consistent approach. Say for Tin Khao Bridge, it's for the purpose of diversion of traffic. We don't agree that $45 should be charged for private cars using the tunnel during peak hours. Now the VC ratio for Tin Khao Bridge is 1.17, whereas for other infrastructure is 1.2. So putting everything together, the impact is just minimal. We propose lowering the tolls for peak hours to $40. So, and in this scenario, the VC ratio would only reach 1.19. The government should try this out first, and that there would not be major traffic jam along Tin Khao Bridge. Now, I'd like to put this question to the government. It's very simple. If it goes toll-free for Tin Khao Bridge, will the VC ratio goes beyond go beyond 1.19? If the answer is in the affirmative, I would agree that tolls should be charged. In other words, the toll plan for Thailand Tunnel could help ease traffic jam in Tuen Mun, and Tuen Mun residents would be grateful. There are 670,000 population in Yuen Long for Tuen Mun. It has a resident population of 530,000, and Tuen Mun residents have been enjoying the toll-free Tuen Mun Road for years. Now, adopting the users pay principle, the government is putting up this excuse. There is room to charge tolls for using Thailand Tunnel because it has always been the practice. The government is only dishing out a concession by lowering the tolls because the government has put in $15.1 billion in Chuen Kwan O Lam Tin Tunnel. And the tolls paid by Yuen Long residents, some 670,000 of them, will be used to subsidize the Chuen Kwan O Lam Tin Tunnel. Why is it that tolls are charged for using Thailand Tunnel and not Tuen Mun Road? In order to address traffic jams, the government has been going by various excuses, the users pay principle, cost recovery, and easing traffic congestions. There are always different excuses. Does it mean that with the completion of Route 11, tolls will be lowered? And what about users pay principle and cost recovery principles by then? What about reaping an investment return? I find the government's proposal unacceptable. Anyway, please explain to me. For normal and off-peak periods, if no tolls are charged, what will be the VC ratios along Tin Cow Bridge? Well, let me answer this question and then I will give the floor to the Transport Department. I understand Mr. Tian's position in relation to our proposal. I respect his view, but let me respond by saying this. Lowering tolls will definitely induce more traffic, and this is just common sense. The second point is that before the government takes over the Thailand Tunnel, the toll levels are really expensive, and in spite of this, it has reached 80% of its capacity. Now, after taking over the Thailand Tunnel, there'll be a reduction of tolls between 22% for private cars and 33 to 80% for commercial vehicles. So imagine additional traffic will be induced for sure, and we need to be very prudent. I also understand members' point of view. They're speaking on behalf of the people who face traffic issues day in, day out. Still, we need to adopt a longer horizon. After taking over the Thailand Tunnel, we will put in place this toll plan. For government policies, certainty and consistency is the key. We cannot change our arrangement overnight. We need to adopt a longer horizon. I'll give the floor to the Assistant Commissioner to take Mr. Tian's question. You understand my question? I was asking the VC ratio for Tin Cow Bridge during off-peak and normal time slots. I understand Mr. Tian's question. Under the proposed toll plan, the VC ratio for Tin Cow Bridge will be 1.17. I'm talking about peak and normal time slots. Well, it could easily go beyond 1.2. I'd like to explain the other point to Mr. Tian. 1.17, that's the VC ratio for a toll level of $45 for peak time slots. I'm talking about normal time slot and off-peak. Now, you haven't told me the VC ratio of Tin Cow Bridge for these two time slots. Yes, understood. Well, you are dodging the question. I'm not talking about peak hours. I agree that it should be $40. Well, I have reservations about $45 for peak hour time slots. Now tell me, for Tin Cow Bridge's VC ratios, what are they for off-peak and normal time slots? Chairman, in the interest of time, we'll provide the figures after the meeting. Mr. Chan Seow-hong. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank the administration for exchanging views with us both in and outside the Council. In relation to the takeover of Thailand Tunnel, the government is being very careful, and the government has also sought views from different stakeholders. Now, the government will introduce a time-varying toll plan in this bill. And we support the government's thinking on adopting users pay principle, cost recovery principle, as well as the efficiency first principle. And more importantly, on the last point about not incurring a loss, The first part of the bill relates to taking over Thailand Tunnel so that it will vest in the government. The second part relates to the toll levels. I think we all agree that the government should take back Thailand Tunnel and that time-varying tolls should be adopted following the structure adopted for the 3 harbor crossings. So there are questions on the second part, that is the toll levels. For the peak time slots, I don't think tolls should be reduced substantially, or there'll be traffic jams. There are already traffic congestions close to Western Harbour Crossing, and you've promised to conduct a review. So for peak time slots, you should make sure that traffic is smooth, at least for this route. Users pay principle, cost recovery, I have no problem with those. But I think I echo what other members said. I'm concerned whether there is room to substantially slash tolls during normal or off-peak hours. That's in fact the crux of the discussion at the panel. At the same time, the government has prepared this proposal on the basis of data analysis and the transport model. So for peak hours, I agree that tolls of $45 should be charged for private cars and $20 for taxis, and that tolls should be used as a tool to regulate traffic. What about off-peak hours? Say over 30% of traffic using Thailand Tunnel are commercial vehicles. Can you simplify the toll structure, make it a 2-tier system? I mean, at night, will the toll plan induce traffic jam? Or perhaps your answer will be that uniform all-day toll should be charged for commercial vehicles in order to make things simpler and to avoid traffic jams during peak hours. And perhaps you can explain to me later. Now, the other point is that the Secretary said that the review will be conducted sometime after its implementation. But let's say if you just lower the tolls a little bit, will you help ease traffic flow at night? Say you can prepare one of the scenarios in which tolls for commercial vehicles will be slashed by half. Is it possible? Secretary. I note Mr. Chan's questions in relation to off-peak time slots and normal time slots. Private cars are respectively charged $18 and $30. We've taken into account the flow of private cars in the transport model, and that no traffic congestion will be induced as a result of substantial reduction of tolls. We have exhausted the room for slashing the tolls. And that's the first point. Second, to answer Mr. Chan's question on commercial vehicles, the uniform toll of $43 will be charged all day long for commercial vehicles. This is a feature according to the efficiency first principle. The reduction rate goes between 33% and 80%. That's much greater than the 22% for private cars. Now, Mr. Chan just reminded us to emphasize the efficiency first principle, and I agree. The second point is whether there is room to further lower the tolls for commercial vehicles during normal or off-peak hours. Let me explain that for commercial vehicles, their flow is not the same as the normal private cars flow, it depends on the time arrangements for dispatching the goods, and they make the corresponding adjustments. And that's a pattern for commercial vehicles. Let's say for commercial vehicles, your suggestion is for us to offer concessions during off-peak hours, but that would directly impact on the livelihood of practitioners. By introducing concessionary tolls, their work hour pattern may change. In other words, the employers may set up different time arrangements for these workers because of the concessionary tolls. Well, this is something that we've identified in our discussions with the logistics industry. In fact, the view is quite unanimous. The industry supports the uniform or all-day uniform toll in light of their operation.
Chairman, a quick follow-up question. During peak and off-peak time slots for Tai Lam Tunnel, there is an alternate route that is Two Moon Road. There is a choice that is free of charge for employers of commercial drivers. We can talk further after the meeting. There is another principle of public transport taking priority. Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Chairman. We try to resolve the traffic congestions in the Northwest New Territories. We have to rely on Route 11 in the future. We all want to take this opportunity of taking over the Tai Lam Tunnel to lower the toll level in order to divert traffic from Two Moon Road. Two Moon residents suffered much because of the traffic congestion at Two Moon Road. Since the announcement of government taking over Tai Lam Tunnel this year, the Two Moon residents have been looking forward to a great toll reduction for Tai Lam Tunnel in order to divert traffic from Two Moon Road. The proposal decided by the government, well, I think that the government has created certain models to calculate the projected traffic flow. But I think that the government should look at the daily traffic flow and try to be more flexible. If the outcome is not as effective, and if Tai Lam Tunnel become very congested if the Tai Lam Tunnel is not as congested after the toll reduction, then perhaps you should slash the toll even further. If you look at the PM peak time slots, it's quite long. For off-peak time slots, if they can be longer and if more drivers can enjoy the $18 toll, I'm sure that everyone would support it, and that would divert traffic from Two Moon Road more effectively. My view is that after the tolls were implemented for some time, please review the situation. If there is room for reduction of tolls, please slash it further. We have to be fair to Yunlong, Tuen Mun, and Northwest New Territories residents. We need to make sure that there is traffic diversion and residents can benefit. Secretary, thank you. The administration, the LegCo, will review the situation together. It's my turn. My view on this tunnel, well, I think that this toll proposal is reasonable. There is toll reduction, and the government has responded to people's demand. The toll level for off-peak hours is quite low, $18 during the evening and morning off-peak time slots. As I said before, the transitional time slot starts from 7:15 a.m. in the morning. I think that's too early because the traffic jam usually happened after 8 a.m. in Tai Lam Tunnel. At 7 a.m., the Tai Lam Tunnel is still very smooth. Hopefully, after 1 year upon implementation of the new toll level, please review it. I hope that the government will postpone the transitional time slot. That would actually encourage people who depart at 8 a.m. to advance their departure time to 7:45 a.m. But if the transitional time slot starts at 7:15 a.m., people won't be motivated to advance their departure time. Some members said that we should lower the toll level further. We don't look at Ting Kau Bridge when we consider the congestion level at Tai Lam Tunnel. Whether motorists are using Ting Kau Bridge or Tuen Mun Road, they will have to use the Tai Lam Tunnel. But I think, well, my view is that we have to look at the capacity of the Pokoi roundabout. Because we don't want traffic jam to happen in Yunlong. My first question. For Western Harbour Crossing, Cross Harbour Tunnel, Tai Lam Tunnel, there is a large toll plaza. I hope that the government will make better use of these plazas. Can we build car parks, parking spaces, park and ride facilities, chargers for EVs or taxis? What is the government's plan for these toll plazas? Second, in Annex D, point number 4, the government said that upon takeover of the Tai Lam Tunnel, the government will engage a contractor to operate the tunnel. And it is said that the contractor will carry out it is said that the Transport Department and Highways Department will carry out the civil and structural maintenance and upgrading works, and the cost is about $99.2 million per year. Tai Lam Tunnel is a mature tunnel. How come we have to pay some $99 million per year to upgrade and maintain it? If the contractor take up also the responsibility of maintaining and upgrading the tunnel, will the cost be lower? If we outsource all of these duties to the contractor and grant them a longer contract, then the overall cost could perhaps be lower. How do we save on our expenses? Secretary, thank you. The chairman has made a great summary of the time slots. During peak time slots, before we formulate the peak time slots, we have taken into account the demand of the residents. So we have actually adjusted the peak time slots and we have postponed it to a later time. We will have to review the effect of it after the toll's been implemented. Some people may try to advance their departure time by 15 minutes in order to avoid the peak time slots. But depending on their destination, some people may even choose to leave 30 minutes earlier in order to avoid the peak time slots. Well, on your point about toll plaza, our goals is that after demolishing the toll plaza, we try to make the most of the space that we have. Maybe we will improve the bus interchange facilities. Maybe we will also offer park and ride facilities. We will make best use of the space and while we ensure traffic safety. In the future, vehicles won't have to stop to pay their tolls, so motorists can drive faster. We have to ensure road safety for commercial vehicles, private cars, and taxis. As our next step, we will let the members know how we use the site for toll plazas. As for the cost for management, maintenance, and operation of the tunnels, what duties have been outsourced and what are undertaken by the administration, well, we try to save costs as far as possible. When we decide on what kind of duties are to be outsourced or undertaken by the government. Thank you. There's still some time left. Let's go into clause-by-clause scrutiny. Please refer to the blue bill and the mic'd-up copy. Would the administration please lead us in the clause-by-clause examination? As usual, we will look at the Chinese version. Would the legal advisor please also look at the English version for us? Mr. Chen? Thank you, Chairman. Now we proceed to clause-by-clause bill. Amend the road, tunnel, government ordinance, and subsidiary legislation to extend the application to the Tai Lam Tunnel to provide for new tolls, including time-varying tolls for certain vehicles in respect of the Tai Lam Tunnel on the takeover of the tunnel by the government, to provide for transitional matters and to make related amendments as well as technical amendments relating to certain definitions. There are 28 clauses in 4 parts. Part 1, preliminary. 1. C2835. Clause 1 set out the short title and commencement. Bracket 1 and bracket 2 set out that the ordinance will come into operation on the 31st of May 2025 upon the government takeover of the tunnel. Clause 2. The amendments as specified in parts 2, 3, and 4 are amended as set out in those parts. Part 2. Amendments to Road Tunnel Government Ordinance Cap 368, Clause 3, C2839 of the Blue Bill, page 1 of the mic'd-up copy. After the government has taken over the Tai Lam Tunnel, we propose to add sections 29 and 30 to the legislation. We will repeal the Tai Lam Tunnel and Yuen Long Approach Road Ordinance and subsidiary legislation, and we will, in Schedule 5, provides for the saving and transitional arrangements. Let's extend the meeting by 15 minutes. Clause 4, C2839 of the Blue Bill, page 2 of the marked-up copy. Amend Schedule 1. We add Tai Lam Tunnel to Schedule 5. to extend the application of the Road Tunnel Government Ordinance to Thailand Tunnel. C2841 of the Blue Bill and page 3 of the marked up copy, we propose to add Schedule 5 to Cap 368 in order to provide for savings and transitional arrangements. These are technical amendments.
如果
Any questions? Please continue. Part 3. Amendments to Road Tunnels Government Regulations. That's Clause 6 C2849 in the Blue Bill or page 10 of marked up copy. Clause 6. Amending Regulation 2 in relation to the definition of goods vehicles and the definition of tricycle in the English text. These are technical amendments. Any questions? Please continue. Clause 6 subclause 3 to add 4 new definitions under this regulation. Franchised bus, motorcycle overall height, and wind susceptible vehicle. Any questions? Please continue. Clause 4 bracket 6 to amend Regulation 2.2. That is to which page? C2851 in the Blue Bill. The relevant vehicle types will go by the relevant provisions in Cap 374 and the subsidiary legislations. Any questions? Please continue. Clause 7, C2851 or page 15 in a marked up copy. To amend Regulation 31A and 36A to add the new signs and road markings 29, and that's number 33 in the current Thailand Tunnel and Yunnan Approach Road Ordinance. This is in relation to the wind susceptible vehicle not being allowed to drive past that sign upon reaching a certain wind speed. No questions, please continue. C2851 or page 17, the marked up copy, clause 8. That is in relation to the exemption. Regulation 8 to be amended. That is left driving tunnel other than we're going to go to the next part in relation to the relevant control of the left driving tunnel. No questions, please continue. Clause 9, C2853 or page 18 of the marked up copy. 8AAB to be amended in relation to control of use of traffic lanes for certain vehicles in Thailand Tunnel. For example, some buses may only drive in the leftmost lane, and that also applies to vehicles reaching a certain gross weight, exceeding 5.5 tons in other words. No questions? C2853 clause 10 or page 19 of the marked up copy. Some franchise buses will need to stop at the tunnel, so we're going to amend Regulation 91C so that they're not subject to the restriction not to stop there. Any questions? Please continue. Clause 11, C2855 in the Blue Bill or page 24 of the marked up copy. 11.5 to be amended to repeal the definition of franchise bus, because the definition of franchise bus has already been added under Regulation 6.3. No questions, please continue. Clause 12, C2855 or page 25 of the marked up copy. Regulation 12 to be amended in relation to the liability for using the toll for using the tunnel and the amount of toll. Any questions? No question. Clause 13, C2855 for page 27. Regulation 14(1)(a) to be amended to reflect that the same provision applies to Thailand Tunnel for for a vehicle the height of which exceeds 4.6 meters or with a wheel load exceeding 4.5 tons or axle load exceeding 11 tons. It should not use the tunnel. Clause 14, C2855 in the blue bill or page 29 in the marked up copy. Schedule 1 to be amended in relation to the traffic control in Thailand Tunnel. We propose to add figure number 29, and that's the current figure number 30 in the ordinance in relation to wind susceptible vehicles. Any questions? Clause 15, C2857 of the blue bill or page 30. Schedule 2 to be amended to introduce a time varying toll for Thailand Tunnel. 15.1 amends Schedule 2 Part 1 to state that this part does not apply to Thailand Tunnel. The tolls relate to Aberdeen Tunnel, Line Rock and Shing Mun tunnels. Next, Schedule 2 relates to Thailand Tunnel. This part will come into effect after the government takes over the tunnel. And then next part relates to other removal fee or as well as the permit fee for Thailand tunnels. Next part, technical amendments or related amendments 16, 17, 18, 21, 28. These are technical amendments that relates to repeal of the Thailand and Yunnan Approach Road Ordinance and the subsidiary legislation. And also the franchisee will be deregistered upon the takeover arrangement, and also other relevant technical amendments in light of the arrangement. About point 22. About composition of the transport functional constituency. Can you explain that? And also Division 7, about amendment to Chief Executive Election Ordinance. Where do we find these amendments? Clauses 22, 23, that's C2873, or page 59 of the marked up copy. That is to repeal the name of the franchisee. So in other words, they are no longer electors. Right. Any views? Please continue. Chairman, as mentioned, these are technical amendments, incidental amendments. I would be happy to take questions from members. Any questions? Please continue. That's the end. All right. Legal advisor. No consistency between Chinese and English texts. There is a letter from the legal advisor. Would members please refer to CB bracket 3 1077/2024 bracket 1. In relation to 6 bracket 3 and 11, the definition of a franchised bus will be moved to cap 368A, and that's regulation 2 of the Road Tunnels Government Regulations, to the effect that the definition will apply across cap 368A. So would the administration please take this opportunity to clarify the following. and whether the Regulation 12.3 of 368A should be amended as well. This is a drafting issue. I will invite Madam Ho from the Department of Justice to take this question. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Member, for the thank you, Legal Advisor, for the question. The legal advisor is really meticulous. Indeed, the definition of franchised bus would be moved from Regulation 11 to Regulation 2 of Cap 368A because as we amend 91CA in Regulation 10 of 368A in relation to stopping within Thailand Tunnel. The exemption applies to a franchised bus, and the proposed amendment for Regulations 11 and 2 relate to this point. As suggested in the long title, we're going to amend the ordinance to extend the application to Thailand Tunnel and to provide for new tolls as well as making technical amendments. We've checked Regulation 12.3 of 368A as suggested by the legal advisor, and that these franchise buses are exempted from the previous regulation. This is not an interpretation clause. There is no inconsistency between the reference of franchise bus here to franchise bus in Regulation 2. We're bound by the long title, so my understanding is that Regulation 10.2 will not be amended. But in the next exercise, our colleagues will review the situation and see whether corresponding amendments should be put in place. Are we all clear, members? That means no other amendments proposed this time round. Can you tell us whether there will be any difficulty if you propose amendment here? Why not do it in one go? As mentioned, we're bound by the long title of the bill. Now, the final part of the long title relates to technical amendments relating to certain definitions. So for Regulation 12.3, we are not sure whether this constitutes a technical amendment of the definition. This provision is substantive. It refers to the franchise buses enjoying certain exemptions. So this may not come under the remit of the long title. So this amendment exercise may not allow us to do so. But anyway, we're going to give a written reply to the legal advisor. Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. As explained by the Department of Justice just now, the legal advisor has raised this issue. In fact, if we go to this provision, you will find that this provision refers to buses that are franchised buses. So we believe that the meaning of this provision is clear enough. The next point is whether we should propose an amendment to this bill. Now, we need to have regard to the object of the bill, and that is relating to the tolls of Thailand Tunnel. The legal advisors raised an issue that is not directly related to the takeover of the Thailand Tunnel to become a government tunnel. Still, we're grateful to the legal advisor for being very meticulous in pointing this out. So in the future, in the next amendment exercise, we'll consider whether making this technical amendment. What's more important is that the bill, as it stands, is clear in conveying the meaning of a franchised bus. Any views? If not, members, shall we hold a public hearing? No? All right, we've had a full discussion. I think the views are clear. The next point is resumption of second reading of the bill. This will take place on the 19th of February 2025, and we are supposed to submit the report to the House Committee on the 7th of February. So the deadline for moving amendments or giving notice of moving amendments is the 10th of February. Please note these dates. Anything under AOB? If not, then that's the end of this meeting. We've completed the scrutiny of the bill. Thank you, Chairman, members. It's very important that we see the passage of the bill soon because we will take over the tunnel in May this year. And we also need to proceed to a preparation. I thank members for their views to help us with its implementation. Thank you.